Hi everyone, my name is Joss and I'm a consultant with MHM, so I oversee our work in Scandinavia, which for the past couple of years has been very Sweden focused, so it's really great to be out here in Norway meeting new people. So Joe has just given a high-level overview of how organisations are successfully embedding culture segments cross-departmentally. How many people were in Joe's presentation just now? So most people. Okay, good. And how many people have heard of culture segments before? Everyone. This is good. This is all good. So I am now going to get a bit more focused and share some practical tips and techniques for developing campaigns, communications campaigns for the culture segments. In the interests of time, I'm going to focus on 3 segments, which Joe did as well, which are the 3 biggest segments for performing and visual arts. That's expression, stimulation, and essence. So I've got lots of interesting things to tell you and half an hour to tell you them in. So I'm going to give you 4 key things to bear in mind, key considerations. I'm not going to tell you what they are in advance because everyone likes a surprise. So the first big thing to bear in mind when developing campaigns using culture segments is this. It's having an understanding of which segment you are in personally. So how many people in the room know which segment they're in? Everyone else, you should do the quiz now because it's interesting and it's useful. Also, how many people in the room are marketers, work in marketing? Okay, so there's a pre-warning here. Some of the things that I'm going to tell you are kind of marketing 101. I don't want you to feel like I'm stating the obvious, but I have lots of examples to bring to life why these things are still important. And we also see lots of organisations not doing these things, so I think it's worth reiteration. But it's really important to understand which segment you are in personally because it allows you to make an impartial decision about the potential success of a campaign. It allows you to understand your own preferences and potentially your own prejudices as well. So, for example, if you are in the essence segment, you might be inclined to instinctively reject things that appear to be marketing. Essence are discerning and confident. They don't like to be sold to. They actually sometimes enjoy being out of kilter with the population, so they like not liking things that everyone else likes, just for the sake of it.
Sometimes they just pretend to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So they'll be the judge of it. But other segments need lots more reassurance, lots more detail in order to make an informed judgment about whether or not to attend. If you're in the expression segment, you might want to seek communications that emphasize the social experience, that show people enjoying themselves at the theatre or in the museum, people creating memories with friends and family. If, like me, you're in the stimulation segment, you look for big ideas, striking presentation, something that really jumps out. I'm in this segment and I'm willing to take a risk with something without knowing the detail just because it looks quite cool and shiny, whereas other segments definitely need more reassurance, the release and affirmation and enrichment segment in particular. But the crux of what I'm driving at here is you might not like a particular communications campaign, but a lot of the time it's not designed for you. So we often see quite bold, imaginative, forward-thinking campaigns being rejected by decision makers because they personally don't think it is right for the organisation or it is right for their ideal type of audience. But often, as Joe said, people who work in the arts, so curators and people who are senior leaders in arts organisations, belong to the essence type segment, so it can be quite difficult for them to make decisions on communications that are designed specifically for a different audience. We have to put ourselves in the audience's shoes. Okay, that's the first big point. Know which segment you're in. The second point, again, it might seem like an obvious one, but having worked with these segments for 10 years and done lots and lots of qualitative and quantitative testing, measuring the impact of different campaigns, there are a few key rules, tendencies that apply to each segment, and it's helpful to kind of become versed in them because it helps you to craft campaigns. And I'm going to talk you through the preferences, these broad preferences, as they relate to expression, essence, and stimulation. And I'll show you some examples as well, okay? So, and there we go. So, now for the expression segment, they really enjoy activities that help them connect with and share experiences with others, yeah? So they're community-minded. They really value institutions and messages that emphasize inclusivity. So they like the idea of a museum or a theatre that invites everybody in. Yeah? They are the segment with the least distinction between amateur and professional art. So they are happy with things that appear a bit rough and ready. It doesn't have to be too polished for them. In terms of how this reflects in communications, they like vivid, evocative, kind of emotional interventions. They really, really appreciate seeing people in communications. They like communications that focus on stories about people, but also visually show people having a good time at an experience. Yeah. They like the idea of experiences, so anything that can give them a sense of what it's like to be there and to be involved in the production in some way. And they like this idea of being able to step back in time, if we're talking about the museum context as well. So they like to be able to feel it as though the people who were there were able to feel it. So let me show you a few examples. So, can you see this might work for expression? This was developed by Kew Gardens in the UK. Has anyone been to Kew before? Yeah. So they use culture segments to kind of develop their messaging. And you can see bold, striking imagery. On the left, the far left one, you can see people kind of frolicking in the garden and having a nice time together. But this is really evocative and kind of strong, bold imagery. Show you another one from San Francisco MoMA. So this was developed for expression. Notice they put the audience at the center of the campaign. So this isn't a post that says, visit SF MoMA, here are the opening times, here's the address. This is a reflection of what they want audiences to experience as a result of visiting SF MoMA. Yeah? SF MoMA, by the way, has like 45% expression visitors, and they crafted this campaign around expression. They're like the most expression museum that we've ever encountered. Another one, this is the Museum of Brisbane. Again, this was an exhibition called 100% Brisbane. You can see that people are at the center of this. People are the focus. Yeah. This is the London Symphony Orchestra. So again, you've got bold colours, words to evoke the power of the live experience. So Chopin's first piano concerto is a musical outpouring of every human emotion. That's like peak expression language. The Elgar piece is uplifting and deeply moving choral work. So again, it's tapping into this idea of emotion, shared experience. I'll come on to buzzwords towards the end of the presentation, but things like join in, get involved, really play well with expressions, desire for inclusivity. Yeah? Okay. So, stimulation. Is anyone in the stimulation segment? Two people, okay. Three. So stimulation, like big ideas, they are risk takers. They appreciate provocation, intrigue. They don't like to be told the whole story straight away. So no spoilers. They want to know what's exciting or what's different, what's new. They don't want to see the same old thing. So this plays quite well. This idea of looking at secrets, revealing secrets, is quite a strong message with stimulation. So this is a campaign that was run by Westminster Abbey. So Westminster Abbey recently opened a new museum space in the attic, or the Triforium, you know, where they film the royal weddings from. So they led with a campaign around revealing secrets. Come and explore a space that's not been explored for hundreds of years. Yeah? Another example is, this is from historic royal palaces in the UK. So this is just a bit of fun. It's kind of unique, it's quirky. Stimulation, enjoy it when you kind of experiment with format and don't just present things in a conventional way. So this is a kind of newspaper mock-up around an exhibition that HRP ran a year or so ago, I think. This, it's not a great picture, this is from Historiska in the Swedish National History Museum. So this was a exhibition they ran called History Unfolds, which, I don't know if you can read that at the bottom, but it says contemporary art meets history. So stimulation, love it when you collide ideas together, when you bring together disciplines, subjects, artists, artworks that conventionally wouldn't go together. They like it when things are kind of brought together in a surprising way. So the idea of interpreting a traditional history museum with contemporary visual art installations played really, really well with stimulation. And stimulation, because we do the rolling research for Historiska, stimulation were significantly overrepresented in the audience for History Unfolds compared to the audience overall. Okay, another one here is the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment. Has anyone heard of these before? You should go and see them if they ever come to Norway, or you should go to England to see them. They are basically a traditional orchestra, so they play 18th century pieces with 18th century instruments sometimes, but they play in very unconventional settings. So they often play in nightclubs or kind of former industrial spaces, that kind of thing. But their whole brand is geared towards stimulation. So this tagline, classical music minus the rules, plays really well with stimulation. This was a really successful concert that they ran. It was in the Bussey building in London, which is a kind of transformed kind of light industrial unit that's been brought to life as an arts building. So they did a really successful series of concerts in there. And the tagline was, want some Beethoven and maybe a burger. So it's kind of playful, and it's challenging preconceptions and expectations around the type of experience that classical music is supposed to offer. Another one for stimulation, this idea of FOMO. So they like to feel like they are ahead of the curve, and they kind of plugged in to the latest trends. So the idea of keep letting them know that they've got the finger on the pulse is a really powerful message for stimulation. This is quite an interesting one from the Science Museum for stimulation. So this was to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Frankenstein, Shelley's Frankenstein. So they did a whole program of activity around that, which one of them was building a Franken toy for kids, but there was also festivals, late night events, etc., etc. So anything late night, or anything you can do with a drink in your hand, or you can enjoy with friends, or if there's music in the museum, anything unconventional, if you promote that in your communications, it's likely to strike a chord with stimulation. Okay. So, Essence. How many people are in the Essence segment in here? There's probably fewer than I would have expected. So, Essence are confident, knowledgeable, I'm going to flatter you all now, knowledgeable, highly experienced cultural consumers. They have seen lots and lots of stuff before, so they're experienced. They understand how the arts work. They can kind of discern subtle differences in approaches to communications. They have a laser-like ability to kind of spot sales messages, and they are turned off by that. They have a really deep appreciation for craft and story and authenticity. They're really, really confident. So sometimes trying to market to essence can deter them from visiting. They'll visit on the strength of the art, and they feel qualified to make that decision for themselves. So they're not really an easy group to market to be honest with you. Some examples of communications that have worked well with essence. So this is from the National Portrait Gallery. It's a Howard Hodgkin exhibition. You see this is just art front and centre. There's no kind of clear, strong message here. It's like, if you know who Hodgkin is, then you're probably likely to attend. If you recognise the artwork, you might be likely to attend. But all it is artist's name, exhibition name, opening times, telephone number, the fact that members are in free, and that's it. Yeah? So this takes a knowledgeable and confident audience member to take the decision to visit based on this. So another example of something that would play with expression. So this is a group called Manchester Collective. They are a kind of classical musical collective from Manchester, where we're from. And this is just a list of their tracks. So if you know them, you know them. And then you might be intrigued enough to visit, to kind of Google it and visit, but otherwise it's kind of reliant on just the immediate resonance of the track list. This next one is peak essence, I should tell you. So this is has anyone heard of Japan House before? It's like a new Japanese cultural centre in London. And this just says Japan House at the bottom, and Discover Japan on Kensington High Street. It's intriguing, but again, it will rely on a leap of faith from the person who sees this, and we know that Essence are the segment most likely to kind of make that leap based on very little information. This is also quite Essence as well, but this is just something that was in the news a bit recently, and it reminded me of Essence quite a lot. Ooh. Okay, I know. Oh yeah. Did anyone see this recently? So it's kind of like, this is for people with really discerning tastes, okay? So what we're driving at here is, again, this is going to seem like marketing 101, but an understanding of the preferences and the inclinations of your segments will allow you to develop communications that sell an experience or a set of benefits, outcomes from engaging, rather than just stating facts and features and figures and hoping that they land with somebody. So we're trying to help audience members imagine themselves visiting in a positive way. And the idea behind this is that one message, one size, does not fit all audience members. Joe touched on this, there are often multiple routes in to the same story and the same experience, and culture segments can help you to identify and articulate those different routes into the same experience. And I'll give you an example of how that works. So this is from the Barbican. Anyone heard of the Barbican Centre in London? So this is the same membership campaign. They ran this a couple of years ago. This is the same membership campaign with a differentiated message for 3 different segments. Okay? Same benefits of the membership campaign. Same benefits of the membership scheme, sorry. So the message for stimulation was membership for adventurers, dare to try something new. For expression, it was membership for lovers, which is quite nice. And it was share the love and bring a guest. And for essence, it was membership for trailblazers. So it's this idea of being in the know and kind of involving, including special events that bring you closer to the action. So this is quite interesting because, like I said, it's the same scheme with 3 different hooks. The intention being to broaden the membership base by presenting it in 3 slightly different ways.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know the word trailblazer.
Oh, it's like, what would be a synonym for trailblazers?
Being ahead of the curve.
Ahead of the curve?
So in advance, knowing about things before other people know about them.
Yeah, like discerning, I guess, yeah. Okay.
How was this implemented? Was it all, was it like in the digital marketing only, or also?
Right, yeah, good question. So this was like an above the line campaign here. So it was in, I think it was posters and kind of leaflets spread around the museum. So.
And all the 3 were out at the same time? Or?
Yeah, I believe they were all launched at the same time. Yeah. Okay, I'll give you another example of how this idea of communicating different benefits to different segments can help you to broaden the audience. Okay, and I'll do it with reference to a case study from the Place Theatre in London. Has anyone been to the Place? Okay, so the production, this is about a year ago I think, was called Border Tales. So the production was delivered by a company called Protein Dance, and this was the communication, the kind of lead campaign that Protein Dance created for the production. Okay, so it promotes a company that people might already know, Protein Dance. You can see that in the bottom right for Essence. It puts the lead dancer front and centre, and basically the kind of thought process behind this communication was that the Place attracts a very committed, knowledgeable Essence audience. So they thought a campaign like this would work quite well because it doesn't overly sell the show. It just says, this is the title, this is the lead dancer, this is the company. Everyone sign up and buy tickets. But the interesting thing with this was the Place themselves thought that this production, Border Tales, which is kind of a look at multicultural Britain, had potential to reach beyond this core Essence audience. So they developed a parallel campaign to reach out to the expression and stimulation segments. Yeah. So this was an example of what they did. They developed a series of postcards that kind of really captured the essence of the story rather than just presenting facts and features on a poster. So really this piece was about prejudice, casual racism, and cultural misunderstandings, which they felt the original campaign didn't quite capture. So they developed a whole series of material around this idea of cultural misunderstanding and challenging prejudices and so on. Do you see how that works? So it had an impact. They could track the impact through their box office because they used that culture segments tag tool that Joe mentioned. So in terms of sales, they went from typically 62% and this achieved 73%. This is really interesting. New bookers, typically they get 20% new bookers. This production got 45% new bookers. Open rates in emails, because they had a differentiated message and they were able to target segments through their box office, doubled from 7.6% to 15%, which meant they could basically spend less on marketing to have the same impact. And they could increase the length of runs because there was more appetite for the seats. And this is quite interesting. So prior to the new campaign, their typical audience profile looked like this. You see 45% Essence, really, really prominent. And if my clicker works, there we go. And you can see they had a much more balanced audience profile as a result of this campaign. So you should say that the audience was larger and more balanced as well. So the stimulation segment increased significantly to almost a fifth of visits, and this expression segment increased a little bit, but there was just like a balancing away from this kind of core, knowledgeable, art purist audience, which is what they were hoping for. So quickly, quite a useful practical tip for crafting communications to speak to different segments is using a lift pitch. Have people seen this kind of thing before? It can be quite helpful if you kind of imagine the desired benefits that a particular segment might seek from engaging with you. Okay? So, if we translate that for expression, this is for a visual arts organisation in London, but they say expression, for our museum, expression is a festival for the whole city, not just the usual suspects, that presents visual art like you've never seen it before, which means audiences are wild and they return with friends. So, if you're launching a new production or a new exhibition, it can be helpful to go through this process for each of your target audiences so that you have a really clear message that you're trying to communicate. Okay. This is my final point. Yeah, my final point is around buzzwords. We know from lots and lots of testing that there are certain phrases, certain words that resonate better with certain segments. We have these for all 8 segments, so come and find me afterwards if you want them all, but I'll just show you expression, stimulation and essence. All of these things play really well with expression. So, involvement, celebration. Expression just like to see people being happy and enjoying themselves during a cultural experience. Anything you can do to capture that will play well. They also like almost slightly over-the-top emotive language. So, things that really create a sense of kind of wonder and being there. Avoid those words, yeah? Okay? So, stimulation, anything that plays to their sense of being ahead of the curve, being in the know, being privy to secrets, uniqueness, intrigue, boundary pushing, that is all good stuff. And not so good. These things might play really well with like enrichment or possibly affirmation or entertainment. But stimulation don't need reassurance from you that something is going to be safe. They want the opposite of that. They want to know that it might potentially go wrong. Okay. Essence are a tricky one because we only have a short list of buzzwords because they have a radar for marketing buzzwords. So buzzwords might not be the way to go with essence. They can see through it a lot of the time. But I think the thing with essence is it's the quality of the work that is front and centre, so they just often make their mind up based on that. Everyone's favourite is not good for essence. So this is what I was saying, buzzwords might not be the way forward for the essence segment. So I'm going to show you one last case study which gives you a sense of how you might employ these buzzwords and these kind of buzz phrases. But it's quite interesting because it relates to a website, so the way that someone has employed this kind of thinking to help structure a website. Yeah. So it's for Non-Such Data in Nottingham, and this was a festival that they produce every year, I believe. So yeah, it's called Shake It Up. And so what they did was they structured the website based on the needs, their anticipated needs of different culture segments, which is quite interesting. So rather than just, they have the conventional navigation structure at the top, but they also kind of structured it in this kind of thematic way, so different audiences could find a different route into the program. So give me the cutting edge was the stimulation, because they want to see what's new, what's exciting. Put me at the heart of the action was for expression, because it's about the individual's engagement and appreciation of the artwork. Essence wanted to so give me the extraordinary, so it's like, show me something that is amazing, that's really going to blow my mind, because I've seen lots of other stuff before, so I don't want to see adequate art, I want to see something that's really special. And affirmation said, give me the cream of the crop, so this is all about, give me the reliably endorsed, strong, well-critiqued work, so they can be sure that it is going to be for them, because affirmation look for endorsement and reassurance. So they want to know that something's the best before they make a decision on whether or not to engage with it. So this is how the page was laid out for stimulation. So you can see the copy, which is like seeing things that are new, unusual and different. These are the best kept secrets of the festival. Expression, delve into an immersive world and escape in a shared experience with these hot picks. Yeah, see how that works? Essence is witness the extraordinary, the best works that we could bring together. So there's notice there's less copy here. There's not as much of a tagline as there was for the other segments. This is just like, this is the really good stuff. And then we come on to the affirmation one, which is the cream of the crop. So this is critically acclaimed shows. So shows that are more likely to offer a kind of guaranteed good time. There's less risk involved, so they can be sure that they're investing their time and money that something's going to deliver, in something that's going to deliver. Okay? So that's just quite a neat encapsulation of how you can present different messages to different segments in a website context, but also how it applies to a program. And that was my last slide. So, like Joe says, I'm going to be in Norway quite a lot over 2019. So if anybody wants us to come in for a chat, a meeting to talk about culture segments or anything else that we do, drop me an email and we can fix something up. But other than that, have a wonderful rest of conference.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess it's one of the most commonly asked questions. How can we make use of the theory in practice? So I guess you guys have questions. We have 10 minutes towards the end now. If anyone has questions, raise your hand. I can't throw this microphone into the audience, so speak loudly and clearly, and Joss or Joe will answer your questions.
My name is Eric. I come from the hospital, and we just did it a survey where we have actually used the culture segments. And my question is how one avoids sort of if you choose to focus a lot on one segment, how do you avoid alienating?
Yeah.
Our core of this is essence. And I'm a little bit sort of worried that if I want to talk to other groups, how do I avoid not making or making them how do I not
How to avoid
alienating. I'll start. Maybe Joss wants to add on. I think you.
sorry, can I?
Yeah.
Because we don't of course we want to keep the essence group, but we also want to attach the others. How do we do that without saying to the essence this is not real?
it's hard to alienate Essence because they will decide on the strength of the work. You know, they will know the work and understand it. So they're not easily excluded or alienated. So that's some comfort. But on the others, it's about finding a way of tagging your database. So sometimes organisations do that. I mean, we have this tag tool system, but others, organisations who don't want to use that, do a survey of their database and find out, you know, it's literally, and find out which the segments are, so that you can then, you know, do what we were describing before, which is send differentiated messages to different people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's about segmenting.
Yeah, that's definitely true, because if you segment your database, then obviously you can just direct messages to particular segments. But I think also it kind of depends on which other segments you're hoping to attract, because if, for example, I'm just trying to get a slide up here for you. Oh, yeah. So, if, for example, you're going from Essence and trying to attract, I don't know, entertainment, which is like, yeah, exactly. It would be a huge brand pivot that you'd have to undergo, and it would probably miss both audiences. But I imagine if you attract a core Essence audience, you might try and diversify for, I don't know, expression, stimulation, that type of audience. So the trick is in carefully crafting messages that appeal to stimulation and expression, but that don't actively deter Essence. So it's creating a message that captures new audiences, but it might not really sing for Essence, but it won't actively deter them as well. So it's kind of in the detail of how you put the message together. And a lot of that comes from careful testing before you launch campaigns. So if you develop, I don't know, a new piece of copy and a new lead image, you can show it to expression, stimulation, and Essence. Stimulation might go, wow, that's amazing. Essence might go, I could take it or leave it. As long as Essence don't go, what is this? I really don't expect that from your venue. Then I think you're fine to assume that this could capture a new audience without alienating an existing audience. Does that make sense?
Other questions? You both talked about tag tools, and I know that NPU are going to make tag tools available to members from next year. Could you go into a little more detail about the practicalities?
Yeah, so I'll stand up, shall I? Because I'm behind the table. Tag tool is basically a piece of software that we've developed, and it is designed to add culture segments data into your box office, basically. So there are a couple of, I won't get into the technicalities too much now, but it's basically, it plugs into your box office and it allows you to add culture segments as a field alongside each case in your box office. So when you are sending out email campaigns, for example, I assume that people in the room now might send out campaigns based on what people visited last time, or how regularly they visit, that kind of thing. It just gives you another field in your database so that you can direct communications towards a specific segment. So you know who is going to receive the message, therefore you know more about what the message should contain, and it means that the message is more likely to resonate and to strike a chord with the audience. And as Olaf says, we're working on building a kind of preferential rate on the software. The software comes on a license basis. It's very affordable, but we're working on a preferential rate for NPU members, if anybody's interested in that. It also allows you to, in addition to tagging your box office, it allows you to, if you want to ask the culture segments questions in any visitor surveys, you can upload the data from the raw questions into this tag tool, and it tells you which segment your visitors are in. So say if you're from a museum or an art museum, if you run an annual visitor survey, you include the culture segments questions, you run the responses through the tag tool, it tells you the segment profile of all of your visitors, and which communications did certain segments respond to, which bits of the museum did certain segments visit, which bits of your collections did certain segments find most engaging. So it's basically a way of tagging your audience according to culture segments. It's quite flexible, and it's hard to explain in 2 minutes, so if anyone wants to find me afterwards, please do.
It's easy to see how we can use this on posters or handouts on flyers, but in our seasonal program, is it a good idea to mix these groups, or should we go for one essence for the big one and then make several programs for the other group? Or
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and there's different organisations have taken both approaches that you described. So we know, for example, that some organisations build programme activity, so I don't know, late events or workshops or lectures for one specific segment. Other organisations have a programming strand in mind, and then they start to think about which 2 or 3 segments could we potentially attract with this by developing the right message. What we would always say is never really go for more than 2 or 3 segments, because that's when you really do start confusing your audiences and kind of conveying a slightly confused brand. But we think if you get 2 or 3 core segments in mind, you can craft the program to meet all of their needs quite effectively if you do some testing beforehand to just check the communications are resonating as you would expect with each audience.
And I think as Joss showed on that last case study where the website brought 4 options together for 4 segments, it's about finding a big hook in. So it might be make it social, or late night events, or the one thing that will appeal, and all you're doing is bringing together other elements of the program and then saying, okay, this may be for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's kind of,
I think one of the important things here is you could probably lay out your program now and look at all of the different. Sorry, what organisation are you from?
Also about
Okay, so you could probably lay out all the different productions and say, this is definitely really clearly going to work for segment X. This is probably going to work for segment Y. So it's about thinking about the art and then thinking about the audience and thinking about where the strongest connection might be. So it's fine to think this production is very, very essence and then just go after essence completely if you think that's going to work. The most important thing is that you can develop communications that give an accurate indication or reflection of the artwork itself, so you're not basically being misleading with your communications in order to sell a production to an audience that it doesn't fit. So you just need to think really clearly about who is this production best aligned with, and it might be that there are 2 routes in, or it might be that there's one really clear route in, but you have to take it on a production by production basis. Is that okay?
Yes, my name is Gunhild. I work for It's a visual organization.
Mhm.
I'd like to thank you for the helpful segment. It's really interesting. But I would like to hear your thoughts about how this could work for a person like me. Because as a mother, I belong to the expression segment.
Mhm.
When I visit exhibitions and things on my own, I'm definitely essence. So I belong to many different segments depending on what kind of role
Mhm.
I mean.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on working with that?
So we would say at core people don't switch segments necessarily, but I think what you're describing is that when you visit as a family, you're looking for a different experience than when you visit by yourself. Is that what you're saying, basically? Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. So I have a model, but it's not on my laptop. We basically find there are similarities in family behaviour that cut across the segments. So we find the expression segment and the essence segment are likely to be in a kind of family mindset where families and children kind of learn together. So rather than it being completely child-led or completely adult-led, we find that expression and essence have some crossover in terms of the family experience that they are likely to seek. So that's one kind of explanation for what might be going on there. Don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I think Joss is right. What we find when we do family research is that we found, two broad splits, but then another one. One is kind of entertainment-led families, another is learning-led families, and then, you know, a slight kind of hybrid in between. So I think but they do, I think Joss is right, they do cross over with these. So I think we could share that model with you.
There's families in all of the segments, basically, and family visits are quite a unique thing. But yeah, we have lots of data on the family behaviours of each of the segments, and expression and essence are quite close together in that respect.
So thank you all very much indeed. Thank you to Joss and Joe. They'll both be around in the afternoon if you have any questions. It's lunch now. If any of you are interested in the session with digital marketing with Music Ally, that is going to be delayed until 2:30, but we'll be down here for that session at 2:30. So thank you very much.
Thank you.